welcome to the Firehouse Roundtable podcast, brought to you by the Ventura Fire Foundation. I'm one of your hosts, Peter McKenzie, retired fire captain with the City of Ventura Fire Department, and my co-host, Jason Kay, active battalion chief with the City of Ventura Fire Department. We are going to bring awareness to real issues that face firefighters and their families. We want you to feel like you have a seat at the kitchen table, which every firefighter knows is the heart of the firehouse. Let's get right into the episode.
Hi, this is Joe from Ventura Fire Foundation. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I want to do a quick plug for the September 11th Memorial Stair Climb, this year being held on September the 7th. We're looking for climbers, sponsors, volunteers. If you want to sign up for any or all of those things, you can go to our website, venturafirefoundation.org, or click the link in the show notes. And please remember to subscribe and review the show. It really helps us to build our audience. Thanks so much.
All right. We'd like to welcome Brian Russo to the show. He's a battalion chief for FDNY. So, Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
I hope I didn't murder your last name. Is that how you say it? Russo? Or?
Russo. Yeah. Sounds French, but it's Italian. So
Of course it is. No stereotypes of New York people here. No. Well, we are excited to have you on the show today. We also have Joe Booth with the foundation, who's the executive director, is subbing in for Jason. So, Joe, welcome as well.
Great to jump in again.
Yeah. So we're obviously our topic today is 9/11, and Brian, you were there. We're excited to hear your story. I know you were just sharing with us before that this is the first time you're kind of publicly talking about it in depth. So we're extremely honored that you're willing to do that with us. And I think a lot of this stuff is going to tie into kind of the mission that the foundation has and the work that we're trying to do. And
absolutely.
So, why don't we just kind of start from the beginning and tell us a little bit about you and then kind of how your story led into 9/11 and kind of start there.
Sure. Absolutely. My name is Brian Russo. I'm a battalion chief of the New York City Fire Department. I've been with the department for 29 years. I worked all over the city, different boroughs. I am married. I'm 52 years old, have a wife and two children, 18 and 16. My daughter is leaving for college in a couple of months. So it's a whole new experience for us here. I do a lot for the department because it's important to me to give back. And part of the reason why I'm here today is to share my story, some of the struggles I've had personally because of 9/11 and events thereafter. And, just to highlight the stress of what we do for a living and to try to, put a spotlight on the healthy coping skills and help that's out there for folks. In the fire department, New York City, I was telling Joe before the store we began, we have an embarrassment of resources. So we do have a counseling services unit. We have a lot of amenities and services available to people. A lot of places such as you guys, maybe don't have access to that. So, and then, we'll get into it a little bit later about the stigma associated with asking for help. Hopefully, I'd like to talk a little bit about that. So that's my backstory. And, that's why I'm here.
Gotcha. Well, I applaud you giving back, right? This whole fire service doesn't work if people just take, right? 100%. It needs people to give back. Kind of in line with what we're doing here. Like I personally retired 3 years ago, but I'm still here trying to do the right thing and do right by the guys. Do right by the guys for sure.
Yeah. Peter, once you have that in you, it never leaves you. It's one of the most selfless professions you can be a part of, and I think that's a great part of the people that are attracted to what we do, the line of work. Mm-hmm. But I think we lose sight of maybe being a little on the selfish side, that self-care stuff. So you kind of get lost. It's a calling. It's not a job. It's something bigger than all of us. But we can tend to get lost, and this is why we're having this discussion today.
Yeah. Well, we always say we fix things. We don't want to be fixed.
Exactly.
We come when we don't know what to do, and we don't want that done to us. But the reality is, we need it probably more than other people.
100%. Couldn't agree more.
So obviously 9/11 was a while ago. Were you,
Yeah.
so you're battalion chief today. What rank were you when the event
I
happened?
was a firefighter on 9/11
Okay.
with I had just about 6 years on the job at the time. Yeah.
Okay. So you kind of knew what was going on. It wasn't your
Yeah.
first day.
Yeah.
Where were you stationed? Kind of start us off there and how that
Sure.
all kind of played out.
So I was a fireman at the time in Manhattan, in Upper Manhattan, in a neighborhood called Harlem, pretty active area. I had worked the night tour before on the 10th. I was due to be relieved to get off that morning, that Tuesday morning. I was kind of waiting around the firehouse, waiting for a detail, which was manpower coming into the firehouse. And that's, just sitting in the kitchen like we all do, having a cup of coffee and, talking to the guys about the night before and upcoming events. And, the events, the first plane struck the tower. So I had gotten relieved and we decided to take a ride. There was about 4 or 5 of us that were off duty at the time to decide to respond down to the site.
Did you have a piece of apparatus to go down, or how did you get down there?
So we had we call it a RAC unit, recuperation and care unit. They bring the hydration to the fires. So, cool rags, towels,
Sure.
wipes, and hydration. So we jumped in with, it was basically a converted ambulance at the time. So me and 2 other folks, a captain and another firefighter, jumped in with the RAC personnel and took the ride down to ground zero.
When the call first came in, was there a sense of the enormity of what was happening, or were you just going to lend a hand for a few minutes and then go home?
Joe, at the initial stages, I think like everyone who was around remembers that vividly. We weren't quite sure what exactly happened. And then the second plane struck the tower, and that was, at that point, to answer your question, Peter, there was not even a hesitation. You had to you knew it was going to be something historic, and not for good reasons. We decided to take a ride down to supply manpower. We knew the manpower or staffing was going to be needed. So,
would you normally respond to calls down that far south?
No, so I'm up in northern Manhattan. Harlem is about 125th Street. My firehouse was on 111th Street. This is the lower tip of Manhattan by the Battery, World Financial Center. So not even remotely close. We always say, unless the world's coming to an end, you wouldn't go to these things. And apparently, unfortunately, that day, that's exactly what happened, what it felt like. So, I'm not the only guy off duty, obviously, that responded. There were hundreds of firefighters that came in from home or were getting off and responded down to the site that morning.
I got a question for you, Brian. So I don't know if this is a West Coast term, but freelancing. Are you familiar with what freelancing is?
Oh, that's universal in the fire service.
Okay, so command and control and who's where and what obviously is a big deal. But clearly, in an incident like this, you didn't have an option. Like, you knew what you had to do. You jumped on that extra rig and you guys went there.
Yeah, Go ahead, Peter.
I was just going to say, what was the command and control like? What did that? I mean, obviously it's chaos. I mean, I've been on some incidents, nothing in it compared to the size of what that was. But what did that look like when you were there?
Yeah, so no designed idea of what we were going to do when we got down there. We wound up responding in. If you're not familiar with Manhattan, towards the eastern side of the towers. And it was absolute, use your term, Peter, it was chaos. Bodies falling out of the buildings, debris, engine parts from the plane on fire on the ground. It looked something like out of a movie. We knew the command post was going to be set up on West Street, across from the towers, towards like the World Financial Center. So we tried to make our way over there, and we went around the east side of the towers, south, undercover, trying to get hit by bodies and debris falling out of the building. We definitely, you remember it like it was yesterday, some of the sights and the sounds and the smells. It's still vivid. But we wound up making it to the command post. They tried to organize it best. We have certain tactics and procedures for fighting fires in high-rise office buildings, North Tower, South Tower, lobby command posts. We never made it that far. We made it to the command post when they knew things were going sideways. They had a command post across the street. where they thought they'd be safe. So we made a roundabout way to the command post, and we're given an assignment. But it was, as we lessons learned as a 9/11, communications, command and control, to your point. Since that day, we've become a much more proactive force than reactive, I think. But in your wildest imagination, no one ever thought something like that would happen.
I don't know that you could ever even replicate training to do something like that. Like,
right,
logistically would probably be impossible.
Yeah,
huh.
And with one of our greatest assets in the fire service is our want to do things. And the hardest thing, especially as a battalion chief now, command and control, is to pull back the reins and get guys to not do something, whether it be for safety. So there's stories from that morning of guys. Bravery we think of as running into the fire and saving somebody. So bravery on that day, there were decisions made by chiefs and commanders in the outer boroughs not to let units respond in, who probably would have perished that morning also. So I'm sure they weren't the most popular fellas that day, but hindsight being what it is, probably saved a lot of lives. Not probably, definitely saved a lot of lives.
Oh, I can't even imagine what that would be like. Like,
yeah,
we're saving lives by not letting you come down here.
Yeah,
that's insane. That's crazy.
Hey, Brian, did I read in your account that when you first got there, you didn't have a radio or didn't have a way to communicate with anyone?
Right. So basically, that's a good point, Joe. Yeah, I forgot to mention that. So we responded down just with our bunker gear: helmet, boots, pants, and the turnout coat. We didn't have any tools or radios. Communications were, we didn't have any. So we were kind of getting news secondhand and just listening to other folks talk, other firefighters talk, and that's how we knew to respond into where the new command post was on West Street. So. And then once there, we were given an assignment to find some forcible entry tools, set of irons, and help find the building engineers to try to get the fire pumps working in the North Tower. Going to look for a set of irons probably saved our lives that day, because we had to check a couple of different rigs to find them. So there was a couple of minutes delay for us actually receiving the assignment and walking into the buildings.
How long after when did in relation to when the building collapsed?
So we were there, we were on scene quite a while before the first tower came down. But once we had gotten the assignment, I basically walked 200 yards to a fire truck. We searched a couple of trucks to get the required tools, and we were on our way into the North Tower when the tower came down. So,
How close were you to it when it collapsed?
A couple of 100 yards.
Oh,
and then that was the old turn and run. At that point, self-preservation kicks in. The command post was basically right on the loading dock of a parking garage. So a lot of the folks that I was with ran into the garage. I wasn't close enough, so I hightailed it up West Street and actually got blown off my feet. Stumbled up the street, and to be honest with you, I thought all the folks that ran into the parking garage had perished, but luckily they didn't, and we kind of dusted ourselves off, thank God, and headed back towards.
Did you reconnect with the guys you were with right away, or was it a long
No,
time?
those guys were gone. We scattered. Like I said, guys went in every different direction. We had to take a few minutes to kind of collect yourself, dust yourself off. Not kidding. It was soot and ash and whatever else in your eyes, your throat. So try to find some water to just wash, rinse off so you can get your bearings. And I reconnected with a few more folks who were kind of starting after we realized the whole tower came down. Try to walk back south to see what we could do to help. And that's when the South Tower came down, basically. And then there's kind of repeat yourself, run back up, try to get the heck out of there as best you could. And listen, I'm very fortunate. I'm here today to talk to you guys. Very fortunate.
So how from the?
I'm speechless. I don't even know what to say. That's good.
This is why I don't talk about this, because it's hard to. I'm getting emotional now even talking to you guys about it. But I'm very, very lucky.
Yeah, thank you. So from the time you got there, how long were you on scene?
It's so funny, Joe, when you mention that. It seems like I was there for about 30 seconds. We wound up being there for hours and hours until nightfall. But probably on scene maybe 45 minutes, before the first tower came down. By the time we made the roundabout way around and then got an assignment and tried to do what we were told to do. And then, it was a little while between the two towers. So like that seems to me, that time between the two towers coming down seems to me to be like 5 minutes, but I know it was much, much longer than that. You tried to find the guys that you were with, and when that proved unsuccessful, you basically were looking for anybody you knew. And I was lucky enough to find a few folks that I knew when we hooked up, and some of those guys perished when the second tower came down. So it's crazy. It's crazy. It still feels, it's visceral, 23 years later, or, it's crazy to talk about it. Like it happened. So you don't think of it happening so long ago, but, listen, it's still, obviously, as you guys can tell by looking at me, it still affects you.
Yeah. I got a question for you. After the first tower fell, no one expected that. Obviously they were like,
no, that was shocking.
Yeah. Did that change everybody's like, the other one could also fall, or did that also seem impossible?
Yeah, no, I think once the first one came down, Peter, I think they knew that it was probably a good possibility that the second one would. And they tried, they were calling, maydays for everyone to evacuate the buildings. These, you're talking about 110-story buildings. Our radio communications aren't made to broadcast from the street to an upper level, and all the internal in-house communications, they were all knocked out by the fires and the impact of the planes hitting the building. So we were kind of, it was valuable lessons learned, on communication that day as well. So, there were guys in one tower that heard the rumble, guys in the south tower heard the rumble of the north tower falling and still had no idea that the north tower had come down. So, if you were in the buildings, you didn't. Only a few guys survived in those buildings. So, which is another miracle that anybody survived.
So, I know you're married now because you told us before we got on.
Yes.
Were you married then on 9/11?
I was dating my wife, Joe. So, at the time, yeah. So, and then obviously, no one, your loved ones, your family. I didn't have any children at the time. Obviously, I wasn't married, but parents, no one could get in contact with anybody, because that on top of the one tower was the communications equipment, and cell phones. They were around. They weren't as prolific as they are now, but there was no way of getting in contact with anybody. And that's
what I was getting at. At what point were you able to contact your loved ones and say, "Hey"?
Yeah, well, I was listed as missing in action for a while. No one could account for you, and I wasn't the only one. There's plenty of guys there that just volunteered or freelance, Peter, to your term, because they wanted to help, and it was tough. It was a tough go. I can't even imagine. I can imagine my wife now, my girlfriend at the time. The family not knowing. That's horrific for. Losing somebody is horrific too, but that not knowing is also very tough.
What did towers come down? I mean, obviously that increased the intensity of the chaos, would be my guess. How long did it take for like some order to be established and like a plan to come together?
Yeah, it took a while, because don't forget, when both those towers came down, we lost most of our senior leadership. William Feehan, Gansey, all the chief of department, they were all killed. So there was definitely a vacuum at the top, and now you had it took hours to consolidate that. We had kind of like a staging area at Stuyvesant High School, which is a private high school down in Battery Park City, and there were the same type of things going on the east side. So it was kind of disjointed, but like the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing, sort of, but you default to your training, even in instances like that. So everyone knew someone had to take charge. And there were a few folks and, higher ups that did. But it took a while. It took a while to get everything, to some semblance of order. And, another building came down that day too. And it was chaotic throughout. throughout the day. You had folks going to the hospitals, people being evacuated, firefighters being evacuated to New Jersey across the Hudson River. It's nothing I've ever experienced, and I hope I never do again. But it's like, I equate it to not never having been in combat myself. I equate it to something like that, like it was combat.
I didn't want to say this because I thought it might be insensitive, but this reminded me of like in Band of Brothers when they were dropped on D-Day and they were dropped behind the lines and they literally got scattered everywhere and no one knew anybody or who they were with, and they just all kind of got together and figured it out. That's where my mind was going when you were saying that.
I think you can draw some definite similarities to that. Chaos ensued, and just like you mentioned before, there was no pre-planning for this because no one could think of such tragedy. And now you look back today, we tabletop, we plan for everything. Any possible scenario, whether it's terrorism, CBRN stuff, we're pretty much one of the world leaders in training and preparedness for these low risk, low frequency, high risk events. Mm-hmm. But that's all born out of the tragedy of 9/11,
Yeah. What did the rest of your time there look like? I can't imagine from what we saw on the news, it looked incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, guys still wanted to do, so even after the towers came down, folks were piling back on, looking for survivors, trying to put out hotspots, fires, tending to wounded or injured folks. We had bucket brigades going later on. This also went on from months afterwards, as far as recovery, rescue and recovery mostly after a certain point, bucket brigades, tunneling through debris, trying to find survivors. That day, there was a little bit of that. To be honest with you, a lot of the guys who were initially down there kind of were shot. We did a lot of waiting around. And eventually we, took the apparatus. It was late at night. Took the apparatus back to the firehouse up on 111th Street, and I'll never forget this. We had a standing ovation from basically Battery Park all the way back up to the firehouse, from all civilians on the streets. With the rig, I was in an engine company, so the hose bed was littered with debris. It was just dust trailing off the rig, and there was probably about 12 of us on the apparatus at that time going back to the firehouse. So, and then I went to the hospital, and that was my day. So, unforgettable.
Did they make you go to the hospital or?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was a little bit banged up, nothing terrible. To this day, Joe and Peter, I have no idea. And there's definitely survivor's guilt associated with that, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in a little bit. But, my knee was twisted up a little bit, and I had, some smoke, dust inhalation. So I was back to work relatively quickly, though. Knock on wood.
I've got a question. So a lot of the mental health and surrounding issues that we deal with at the foundation and firefighters, mm-hmm. They're more chronic, over time, seeing terrible things on a continuous basis.
Yes.
It doesn't, maybe it's just my limited perspective, it doesn't seem like a lot of the issues that trouble the guys are like one-time incidents. Yeah. Obviously 9/11 being totally different.
Yeah, that would be the outlier.
Did you see, because I can only imagine, I would imagine some guys broke down immediately, or did it incapacitate anybody? Were they not from physically being harmed, but just from the enormity of?
Yeah, absolutely. You still, to your point, it's an excellent point, because it's 9/11 has been both acute and chronic, right? So you've seen right after guys retired, guys left the job, and who the hell could blame him, right? I mean, we'll get to my story in a minute, but there were guys who, turned to drugs, alcohol, so many different side effects, health effects, acute or injuries, but the long-term health effects we're seeing now, we've surpassed the amount of firefighters killed on 9/11 due to 9/11 related illnesses. So, it's continues to this day, and it's a horrible reminder. But yeah, it was both acute and it's been chronic.
Were there guys that on the day of tapped out and they like just broke down and couldn't do anything else? Or
Yeah, there was guys that were, paralyzed and just numb. Like, guys lost their whole companies. Guys lost 15 guys from their company. I don't know if I could have functioned, to be honest with you. Some of those guys came back to work, and we definitely, another lesson learned from 9/11. We really invested a lot into our counseling services unit. I know you guys have had Drew Kane on. Drew's fantastic, and he's part of the reason why I agreed to do this. He vouched for you guys, so no, Drew's fantastic, and the work the work they do there. And CSU was around a lot longer before 9/11, but it wasn't as prevalent. A lot of folks didn't know what their full capabilities were, and they've come a long way too. So it's been a long road, but I'm happy to be here to talk to you guys about it.
Yeah. It sounds like a dumb question, but what impacted you the most? What was the hardest thing for you to deal with?
No, that's a great question. Cause it was different for everybody. There was 8 guys from my probie class that died. I had 50 close people that I considered friends that I had relationships with that perished. We lost a lieutenant from a neighboring company and a couple of battalion chiefs from my battalion. And it was geographical in impact a little bit as far as death toll, to be, quite honest with you. The closer you were, the more chances you had. We were just far enough north where no one from my company was killed. We had a couple of people that retired due to injuries, but luckily, by the grace of God, no one was killed. But for me, I struggled mightily with the survivor's guilt. That was a tough one. I mean, it was a double-edged sword. I was, so grateful, that, God saved me that day, and I'll believe that. But then, I had a lot of friends, like I just mentioned, families who, never went home to see their sons or their wives, and that stuck with you. It still sticks with me a little bit, to be honest with you, today. That was, for me personally, was extremely, extremely difficult.
Yeah. I couldn't even imagine. That sounds terrible. Is there a divide in the department now? Like, are there people who were there and people who weren't there? There
were very few of us left that worked that day and were, down at ground zero. I mean, listen, a lot of guys worked, we call the pile afterwards. So, but I'm just, those who responded that day, for the collapses, there are not too many of us left. Most are retired. A lot, unfortunately, are no longer with us. I think we do a very good job, of memorializing and teaching, the newer generation, of the sacrifice that our fellow firefighters made that day. We do ceremonies every year, obviously. A lot of places do. It wasn't just New York City impacted, right? So, but we do a good job. And to me, it's important to get the message out of the change that has been made. The changes, been dramatic changes in the fire department, the way we conduct our business. Like I mentioned before, command and control, communication. I could go on and on and on. But it's important for these folks to know that that's where this is born out of tragedy. Some good can come, right? I've been involved. I've been at other fatal fires that, Black Sunday in 2005, the Father's Day fire before 9/11. There's plenty of loss of life. The worst thing you can do is forget. So the next generation. So we do, I don't know. So divide, I don't think there's a divide. I think there's very few of us left. And, these oral histories don't get passed down anymore because there's not too many of us we don't talk about it. Like I said, this is, I wear the ribbon proudly on my chest or my dress uniform, but, so they know by seeing it. But, even my family, my wife, my kids, they've never been to the reflecting pools. I've never taken them to the 9/11 museum. I just, it's too painful, to be honest with you. So not that I don't want to go, because I've been, but, it's too painful.
You mentioned survivor's guilt. What steps did you take to help you yourself kind of cope with that and mitigate that?
So If I had to do it all again now, Joe, I've gained a lot of knowledge. I've had some personal struggle with alcohol, and that was my coping mechanism. To be honest with you, I didn't know any different, right? So the fire department culture is a great one. We do a lot of things together. We're a family. Oftentimes that, for fun includes alcohol. That's what I turned to. I mean, and then there were counselors available. The CSU, like I mentioned before, was in existence. I didn't go that route. There is definitely a stigma associated with asking for help when we have all these alpha personalities, these doers that we mentioned before, right, Peter? And that's a big deterrent for a lot of folks, and it still is today, to be honest with you. So I suffered, for years. I recently, and I'll be honest with you, I stopped drinking a year ago. So for 20 plus years, I had an issue. And I can tell you, I knew about counseling. I was friends with Drew Crane. I got help for some of my members, firefighters, when I was a lieutenant and captain. But I never saw it myself, So, and that's the dark side of this. There's plenty of opportunity out there to get help. What you guys do with the Ventura, Foundation. It's just that it's a sign of weakness for a lot of people still. And so that's why I wanted to come on here today too, because, and to talk about this, as painful as it is, there's a bigger picture, there's a mission here to let folks know, especially firefighters, that it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah. I think especially with the experiences I've had with guys that need help, most of the time they think, I would say 9/11 is probably excluded, but most of the time they think, oh, this is just not that big of a deal. It's just a little thing. Like it was just that one call and I'm fine. Like, I think they would be, well, evidently not, because you're sharing your experience. If it was something bigger, maybe they go, oh no, that's big, I need help. But the reality is they probably still do the same way. But most of the time, even just from what you're saying, you were still helping other people, even though you wouldn't, you needed the help.
It's
we
crazy.
Still have the same, yeah.
It makes no sense until you're actually living it, right? And that's part of the addiction. The fear, the isolation, denial is huge on that. I like you can rationalize anything when you're struggling with addiction, right? So, right, and this is not mine, but someone told me this. When you spell rationalize, the last four letters are LIES because you're lying to yourself, right? So, the anger, I had a huge blind spot. Everything, as my relationships with my family and friends were crumbling. The one thing I had was work. And then, I threw myself into that, and kind of that compounded issues. And, that's, even work started slipping a little bit. So, I need to get help, and I'm glad I did. But again, it took me 20 plus years because I was worried about the stigma of being that guy.
So you're definitely not alone in that. I mean, how many would you say most of the guys didn't get help after 9/11 or?
Yeah, I think, we were, like I said, back to the culture. You were brought up to, not worry about your problems, solve them at the kitchen table, tough it out, right? Compartmentalize it, and, we mentioned, acute versus chronic, trauma is cumulative, you can suppress these things in some cases for decades, but eventually it's going to take its toll. And a lot of times with the addiction and asking for help, people wait till they hit rock bottom and it's too late. Right. So, we need to be much more supportive in a non-punitive way of getting help for folks. In the fire department, we can refer our members, right? No questions asked. You're going to go, if they refer themselves, it's no big deal. If it's a supervisory referral, they still get the help they need, but then they're, they're kind of on the radar for the department for lack of a better term. And it's hard, man. It's hard. You can't force someone to go or get help if they don't think they need help. They need to do it for themselves. And that speaks to the selfish part of what we discussed earlier. So it's not always easy. But I think if you get the word out here, try to normalize it a little bit more. Because like to your point, Peter, there's plenty of us out there that are suffering, and to suffer in silence. And I did it for a long time. it's brutal.
Thanks for listening. This is Joe from Ventura Fire Foundation. We have an exciting lineup of free webinars for firefighter families in 2024. In August, Maggie Hernandez, Associate Marriage and Family Therapist and Firewife, will talk about how firefighter couples can maintain a healthy relationship. The webinars are open to fire families throughout the U.S. and will be held on Zoom. There are limited seats available though, so register soon. You can register on our website or through the link in the show notes. All of the webinars will be recorded and made available on our website and YouTube channel. Support from Vanguard Charitable made this series possible, and we thank them. Now back to the show.
Joe, I got a question for you. You made a comment one time when you first started working with us, when you didn't know kind of the inner workings of the fire service and this culture that we're talking about. And I'll never forget the comment you made. It wasn't bad, by the way. It was something to the effect of, I'm terrible at quotes, alcohol really surrounds like everything that you guys do. We're always having events at breweries and drinking this, and talk about that a little. Because when Brian started talking about the alcohol in the fire department, I immediately thought of that, because you have an outside perspective. Like you didn't grow up in a firehouse.
No, I mean, it just seems, again, from an outsider, it's like whenever we plan an event, it's always, what brewery are we going to get to donate the beer, or where are we going to have it, or we got to have alcohol and we can't charge for it because the guys don't want to have to pay for their alcohol. And so it's just
we like free stuff.
It's in the culture, and what really opened my eyes is, when I first started, one of the first things I did was get together some spouses to talk, and they brought it up. They said, "Hey, these guys are drinking way too much, and it's affecting us at home. And so how do we work on that?" And so we're trying to figure that out. But it's it's not I'm not a clinician or anything, but it's not a good coping mechanism for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's legal and it's sanctioned, right? I think if drugs were legal, we'd probably be doing drugs too, right? Because
no doubt about it.
Something to cope and numb some of this stuff, which is terrible, right? It's not the right way to handle it, but it's reality for a lot of people.
Right. It's what it's the culture, which, the fire department culture, again, it is, most of it is fantastic, right? The things we do for each other and for people we don't even know, but if you have that predisposition, if you're suffering through stress or trauma, it's a slippery slope, right? So, I realized I didn't know about this because my mother never talked about it. My grandfather was an alcoholic, but it's taboo to talk about that, especially back in the 50s, 60s, 40s. But I didn't find out about that until I had started my journey to recovery. So, so go figure, right? It's there. All the signs were there. Just no one ever talks about this stuff. So, I've gotten past that. And to backtrack too, that stigma where I thought everyone was going to treat me differently, I couldn't have been more off base. Everyone was extremely supportive. It was great. So unfounded fear. But it's that fear, that addiction, that fear, it's what that keeps a tight stranglehold on you.
Well, they were probably proud of you because they wish most of them aren't as strong as you were, maybe, or they knew they had a problem too.
And that's kind of why I wanted to come on here too, to spread that word, to normalize it. You put a face with it, right? So, and listen, I had 28 years in the department before I asked for help. At 51 years old, right? So it's never too late either. So you can fix it. It's fixable, but you got to ask help. And these folks that offer this help are fantastic at what they do. Yeah. They care. You guys can speak to this too through the foundation. Yeah. Joe, it's amazing. And you don't know what you don't know, right? So if you've never gone through this process, I can tell you now, I'm in a way better place than I was 15, 12 months ago, 35 pounds lighter, outlook on life, rebuilding relationships with my family. Work is better. I appreciate things more in life now. You want to scream it from the mountaintops, but again, you can't force somebody. I think you have a problem, go get help. And, whatever. Or if someone seeks you out, so you put this out here, maybe you guys will get some phone calls or emails about it. Fantastic, right? That's what we're trying to do today.
So one of the biggest struggles that we have as a nonprofit is we have all these services that we've kind of curated or at least can show people how to get the help. And then you have people that we know need help that people are referring, hey, this guy needs it. You talk to whatever that looks like. You can't make people take the help. You can lead them to water, but sometimes that's all you can do. And when you do that over and over again, like the foundation, that gets frustrating too, because it's like you've seen what good can come out of it and you can't get someone to do it. That's hard.
It's extremely hard. It's frustrating. I've offered my help. Drew and I, talk often, and, I put it out there. If, you got my number. If someone wants to talk, and to your point, Peter, you can talk to them, and that they need help because you went through the same thing. I was in recovery. I was in rehab for a month. It changed my life. But, admitting that you have a problem is it's especially in the fire service, it's extremely difficult because it's normalized. These activities are normalized and there's nothing wrong with it. But, you got to try to, your coworker, you have a duty to act, coworkers, supervisors. So I don't know what the answer is, but talking about it and putting a face to it and those in the profession, if we can, use it as an example, by all means, right? That's what we're here for now.
I think that's all we can do. Make the stuff available, normalize it, talk about it. I've got a question for you.
Sure.
Is 9/11 talked about all the time in the firehouse, or is it something that's still like, I know Brian, I know the chief was there, but I'm curious, some new guy, but I'm not going to go start asking him, or what is that? What are the rules around that?
It's a really good question. It's not talked about. I think it's out of reverence, to be honest with you, that it's not talked about. The month of September and leading up to it, absolutely, it's a big deal, right? You can't escape it. It's part of our history. It's part of world history. And it's all over the media and news and TV and cable for that month. So, we tend to focus on it then. But they don't, at least this is my, guys don't really ask you. It comes out every once in a while, and new guys say, oh, were you there for 9/11? And my answer is like, yeah. And that's pretty much it. And then they kind of get like, okay, let's not bother him, So it's a thing. Like it is a thing.
Yeah.
And that's just my personal, some guys maybe do talk about it. I don't know. I haven't. Okay.
I would expect it to be a thing. Like I can't imagine. Why would you want to resurrect this over and over and over again?
Yeah.
A question for you, since obviously this is a ton of media attention, and all the fire departments that I've ever known make a remembrance. They do a thing on the morning of. Then you start seeing a lot of these stair climb events that pop up. How do you guys view that? Like it was your event, your incident, like how is that viewed in general?
Well, the department runs a few stair climbs also. So I think personally, it's a tremendous way to honor the folks that passed away. And listen, it keeps it in everyone's mind, right? So if you're not going to have these oral histories, I know, Joe, you found it on the New York Times, right? So it's public domain. But who's really looking at that, So, but these stair climbs, it puts it out there. And to your point, Peter, you guys run one too, right? So that's fantastic. I think it does keep the memory alive. And then maybe that'll spark the discussion of the sacrifice that these men made. As painful as it is to talk about, it warms my heart to see people still, thinking of these fellows and that day, because I will tell you, I have two children, and I know, at least here, and which you would think would be different in New York, it's really not talked about too much in the classrooms.
Oh, really?
Wow.
What does no one talk about regarding 9/11 that you think people should talk about or know about? Like obviously the obvious stuff people talk about, like, or what can you share that you wish people did know or remember a certain way, or kind of a hard question?
Listen, we were, held up as heroes, and I think rightfully so, along with the Port Authority and the PD. There were a lot of other folks there that day that help. The iron workers, civilians, EMS, volunteer fire departments from outside the 5 boroughs came in to staff firehouses that day. And in the weeks following, we lost a ton of apparatus that day. Obviously, the manpower, staffing, the boat captains that ferried people across the rivers. We got the lion's share of attention for horrible reasons, but there were a lot of other things that day, and that did a lot of the people that did wonderful work that day, and then also just the ongoing struggles. I think what we're talking about now, the deaths associated with it, and again, not just firefighters, right? We have ironworkers, John Field. We have the ironworkers passing away. We have other responders, construction, Local 3, the electricians, all these contractors. So that's the sad ongoing legacy of 9/11, that we have to struggle with the Zadroga Act to get the funding to help these people every couple of years. I mean, what are we doing here? Thank God for John Stewart, or else, this is crazy to me. But, this is the world we live in today.
So that goes to my next topic is the public is fickle, right? Like, there could be a natural disaster. It happens all the time on our coast when there's wildfires. Like, Ventura strong, the Thomas fire blew through, or Chicago strong when the bomb, the bomb went off. People just move on. They're like, oh, something else happened. Okay, forget about all that. Now we're on to the next thing. I feel like hopefully they stayed on 9/11 for a while, but talk to what it was like to be a fireman post 9/11 when everyone was, like you said, doing standing ovations and praising you guys. Like, how long did it take for that to wear off?
We're our own worst enemy, right? So the firefighters, we mess up a lot of good stuff. No, we were riding a long high there, and it showed you how well regarded we were in the public. And I never forgot that. And a lot of us that were on, around for those days didn't. So we do try to uphold our responsibility and our service to the city of New York. To your point, though, Peter, we live in social media universe. The next news cycle is right around the corner. You could go back to Sandy Hook shootings, any kind. I mean, how do you not pass gun reform after that? Not to get off topic, but this is the world we live in. It's the news cycle is so short, and people's attention span that goes with that, right? So anything we can do to keep it, in the forefront, and like you said, natural disasters, other parts. It seems like if you're not directly impacted. Yeah, so what, So, we send FEMA, USAR teams all over the place. You guys are, very good at fighting the wildfires and stuff like that. Again, we help when we're called to help, and it doesn't matter where or who, and you would think that there would be some kind of, and there is appreciation, a lot of it. Don't get me wrong. But I think you kind of lose sight after a while, and people just get accustomed to, hey, the firefighters will come do it. And that's that, it's their job.
Yeah. So what you mentioned that you are 28, 29 years with the department, 52 years old. You have a child who's about to enter college. What's next for you? Like, you're coming on 30 years. Are you looking at retirement soon, or?
Yeah, to be honest with you, this past year, I thought long and hard about retiring. I had, a son who had some issues. My father was very, very ill. My personal struggles, and I thought I might be better off packing it in and just focusing on that. And I took some time away from the job, and it kind of recharged my batteries, to be honest with you. It's all I know. And there is life after the fire department. But I'm not ready to go yet. I kind of recharged my batteries, like I said. So I was planning on sticking around. My son my younger child is 16. He's still in high school. This gives me the ability to still help, which I love to do. Once it's in you, right, Peter? It never leaves you, whether you're retired or not, right? So you're doing this type of stuff. So
does your boy want to get on the job or no?
It's funny. The open competitive test, the filing is next week. My daughter is old enough to take it. And I asked if she wanted to. She said yes. So
wow.
that warms my heart. Now, whether or not she really wants to be a firefighter, that's another story.
Yeah.
And there are certain parameters set up now where if you don't live in New York City, it's a little tougher to join the fire department. But so she said yes. So it's in my family's blood too. My grandfather and my great uncle were both firefighters. My father and my uncle were both cops. So the joke in the Russo family is that it skips a generation. So
is it hard to get on FDNY?
Yeah, it can be. It can be. It's an open competitive test. We get 40 to 50,000 people that take the test. They do give preference for living within the 5 boroughs. Veterans credit, which absolutely they should get points for that. And it's not for everybody, right? So we do get an attrition rate in Proby school. It's not, if you want it, you can get it, but it's not for everybody. So,
well, this has been great. I appreciate your openness. You're willing to talk about it. I think if people are listening to this, and I mean, you don't get more street cred than a career like you've had, and if you're willing to say, yeah, you need to get help, and don't be, even if it's in the last 2 or 3 years of your career, still do it, because. Yeah, I think that's just amazing, and I applaud you for doing it and for sharing. And it's not easy; it's difficult to do.
It is. Obviously. It is difficult, but we want to get rid of that stigma. We want to change the paradigm of the way this stress, trauma, addiction, whatever it may be. It's okay. We're tough on the outside. That's what's the old saying. The only thing you can hurt on a firefighter is their feelings, right? So, and that's a big part of it, the mental part of it, mentally tough until a certain point, and then you're going to reach that breaking point. That stress is cumulative. That's something I learned all along the way. I thought I was doing a great job compartmentalizing all this stuff I was dealing with, and then wound up, that was not exactly true. So, like I said, it's been a wonderful journey. I don't regret any of it. I'm glad I got the help that I did when I did. I think what life would be without my wife, without my children, without my job, God forbid, I shudder at the thought. So, and it took was a conversation and a phone call, and that was it. That was really it. And I was on my way. So if this can spark a conversation, if this can change the paradigm in a small way, I'm happy to share and help in any way I can. That's what we do. Right. So did I ever think I'd be helping in this manner? No, but, it's been a change. It's been a calling to me to give back any way I can. I'm that serious about it. It was that life-changing for me that if it worked for me with, like you said, Joe, 29 years on the job at 52 years old, you can help anybody. So I appreciate you guys having me on and let me speak for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah. I was going to say, we're working on some stuff. Obviously we didn't talk much about family in this episode for obvious reasons, but we are working on some things for the people back at home, the spouses that are married to firefighters and the kids and all that. And one of those things we're going to need help with is helping us infiltrate the fire service in other areas. Right. So we're working on this thing that we think is going to help a lot of people. Well, as you know, firefighters are very territorial, very, this is my department, this is my area. So we are, one of the things we're struggling with is breaking through that. And so if we have you and FDNY and you can put it out to a couple people and then they can put it out to a couple people, maybe we'll make a bigger impact.
Listen, I mean this in all sincerity, guys. If there's anything I can do to help, Joe, you have my number, my email, Peter, by all means, it's tough. And like you said, the spouses and the children, my wife and kids suffered tremendously. I had 2 kids that weren't really talking to me. And now, I went on all these college visits with my daughter, just dad and daughter. So night and day. I wouldn't have been able to do that a year ago, so.
That's awesome. Where's she going to school?
She's going to go to Hartwick College up in Oneonta, New York, upstate New York. She's a lacrosse player. Okay. So we're looking forward to that. So I get to enjoy that too.
Yeah, so, it's close to my heart. My daughter's going away this in a couple months as well.
Good for you. So, good for you.
Yeah. She's staying on the West Coast, but
all right.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm ever out in LA visiting my brother,
Look us up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man.
Look us up.
Absolutely.
You got it. You're welcome at all times. So
Thank you very much, Steve.
well, any last parting words or?
Joe, I mean, I just, this has been great. Obviously I was a little nervous, speaking about a topic that's, a cause of a lot of anxiety for me, but getting it out there, like I said, if that can be a spark to a conversation or help somebody, along the way, being comfortable, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable is fine. We do that every day in the fire service. So this is just another aspect of that, right? So talking about these someone's got to talk about it. Sitting in silence is not the answer. You need to get it out there and talk about it. So, like I said, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you guys, and I really applaud the work you guys are doing out there, because it's valuable work, and it's hard to get resources sometime, and the buy-in stuff too. So, but like I said, if there's anything I can do for you guys, please let me know.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming on. I want to say one last thing. We talked about it a few times, and it's these oral histories that are disappearing. Mm-hmm. And one of the angles on our podcast is capturing those stories.
That's
and
great.
We're obviously focusing on like guys in our department, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Sure.
But once like the generation before you have pretty good memories of, but the generation before them, who you've heard the names, but you don't know them, those stories are gone the second that next generation taps out.
There was no social media back then. No, there's no way to record that. Yeah.
So we're trying our best to document some of those stories so that we can pass that down for generations to come.
That's great. That's great work, guys.
All righty. Thank you, Brian. We appreciate you.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks for the opportunity. Good talking to both of you. Be safe.
Well, Joe, that was heavy.
Yeah.
There was a lot there. I mean, he seemed like he says he was struggling and he seems pretty put together from my perspective. Like I thought he would have had a harder time talking about that. Not to take away from how hard it was, but he seems to have weathered the storm.
I mean, we all watched it and know about it, but to hear from someone who was there, and I'll when I post this, I'll also post his interview with the New York Times. He did a couple months after 9/11. That gets into a little more detail of the gore, frankly, that he witnessed that he didn't really want to get into here, I think. So, it's amazing. I mean, we say that, firefighters are heroes, but maybe there's a level of hero above that. And those guys on 9/11 kind of fall into that.
I don't think it gets, I don't think you can't top that. And it's they earned every bit of it. I mean, they sacrificed quite a bit. I thought it was pretty inspirational that at the end of his career, he still raised his hand and said, I need help. And then most people would be like, I'm at the end of my career. It doesn't matter anymore. Not him. And he's got a bright future and a happy future. And that was cool. That was hopefully inspirational to guys that are getting close to retiring, because you don't retire out of this job and you're in perfect health. It just doesn't happen, whether it's mental issues or physical issues. Like you don't walk out that door the same as the day you walked in. Like it's impossible.
Takes a toll, for sure. It's funny because for 2 years I've been trying to get someone to talk about 9/11 on the show, and I tried every path I could think of, and no one wanted to do it. Until we did the show just recently with Drew Kane and Chief Hamilton talking about transcendental meditation. Drew was with FDNY, and I asked him, "Hey, do you know someone?" And he just put me in contact with Brian Russo, and he was super eager to do it. So it's another example of not what you know, but who you know.
Yep, exactly. What do we got? What's the foundation got coming up?
So our webinar series, our upcoming webinar is August 13th with Maggie Hernandez, talking about relationships and how to keep those strong when one of the partners is, or maybe even both of the partners, are in the fire service. And then, really the subject of this podcast, the stair climb on September the 7th. We are still looking for sponsors and climbers and volunteers. And so if what you heard today strikes a chord with you, and you want to honor those firefighters and first responders who perished and sacrificed on 9/11, come out and support the stair climb. Either climb or donate or participate however you want.
Yeah. Well, it was actually, I wasn't sure how he was going to answer that question about how does the actual FDNY guys feel about all the stair climbs, and obviously it was positive, but I could have seen that going a couple different directions.
If it was negative, we would have cut it out. No one would have heard it.
Anyhow, all right. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Peter.
Appreciate you.
it.